you don't know. You've tried your best, and then all of a sudden, all the technical glitches that can pop in actually do. But we've been able to rectify that before the start of the session. So I'm going to start with, and I'm going to ask you a question or two, and then based on those your feedback, we'll know on what areas in this particular chapter on culture and subculture, with the learning outcomes of the chapter highlighted there, which ones we need to focus, because this is revision. It's not a repeat session, but it will be a repeat session of work that we are still not 100% comfortable with. And I want you to therefore, for the remainder of the semester, because we will be dealing with mainly with revision, I want you to work one chapter in advance. For Tuesday, for instance, have a look at chapter 5, so we can discuss the important aspects in chapter 5. I just don't want to repeat the session, but if it's necessary, then I'll do it. So let me just see. Culture and subculture. Let's see what we can understand and remember. If, let's say, for instance, if Jonathan has been in a driving a VW Polo for quite a while now, and he's actually now urging his friend to also buy one. He makes statements and comments like it's a great car, it's well built, it's a good safety record, and that's what basically Jonathan tells his friend now. And then Jonathan's statement that he has made, it's a great car, well built with a good safety record. Is that an expression of a custom or a belief or a value or a culture? What would you say? Anybody? Nobody? Oh, everybody's still fast asleep on this beautiful.
So I heard the scenario, but could you please repeat the last part?
The last part, Warren, was the statement that Jonathan made to his friend when his friend asked him about the. His friend probably asked him, right, I mean, Jonathan, you've been driving VW, I mean, what do you think? And Jonathan's reply was something along the lines of, oh, it's a great car, it's well built, it's got a good safety record. So that specific statement, is that an expression of culture, belief, value, or custom? Anybody? Is he making such a statement because it's part of his culture, because of it's a belief, or custom, or a value?
So I think it could either be beliefs or values. I feel like it might be like that's what he might value in a car, but that I don't think. Yeah, I think it might be value, not beliefs.
You're quite right. It is value, and because value is something that is important to us. Obviously, the safety and the reliability of the vehicle with the and the good safety record is something that Jonathan values. Where a belief is more something that we think is correct, but we believe that it is correct, regardless if it's been proven scientifically or not. And customs is more sort of a routine that we go through because of our specific culture. It's a routine act that represents a particular culture, like initiation ceremonies for a particular African cultures, for that matter. It's part of a culture. It happens, and it can be public, it could be private, but that's the distinction between the three elements that that was part of this particular question. Let's see. I'll come up with another question here for you. And let's see if we can. Consumer behavior, and there's a lot of researchers, a lot of researchers have been involved in this. They are examining consumers' knowledge and evaluation of products in terms of their general influence. How they guide behavior and how widely accepted they are would be consumer behaving studying customs, cognitive processes, values, or needs. I'm going to repeat the question to you, if I can actually decipher my own handwriting. Consumer behavior researchers are examining consumer knowledge and evaluation of products in terms of their general influence. How they guide behavior and how widely accepted they are. What they are therefore studying can be seen as consumer customs, consumer cognitive processes, consumer values, or consumer needs. Anybody, any idea? If you are doing research and you're looking at how consumers behave, and you're specifically looking at how they look at products in terms of the influence that products have on their behavior. In other words, your choices to make, the choices they'll make to buy a particular product. Is the fact that you will choose products based on how widely the products are acceptable? Is that studying the customs or the values or the needs of a consumer?
So I think it might apply to all of them, because I feel like all need to be taken into consideration, maybe.
It could definitely be all of them, yes. How widely they are accepted is probably the key in the key words in that question, because if a product is desperately needed, yes, it would be a study of customers' needs. But I think probably in this case, again, value is probably the one that comes out as the let's say as the winner, but as the more correct answer, because if you study a particular culture, if you study a particular culture and you look at the value of what certain products have to people in that culture, it is probably a good reflection of or how important that is, the sort of the status and the acceptability of that product in a particular culture is probably going to because it's probably going to be because of the value that it adds to your status, but it can very much be a combination of both. And again, I think maybe the question, maybe I could have structured the question better, because it does open the door for us to for interpretation, and yeah, I said yes. Probably based on what I've asked, it could be all of them. However, if we return to the chapter itself, and I think just with the two questions, what I intended to do is just to highlight again how extremely difficult it is for us to actually completely understand the subject. And I think it's because it's such a and I think it's also because of our specific situation in South Africa with the cultural diversity that we have. But it's not just limited to our culture. It's our country. It's the same all over. People are not just living in the geographical area in the country where they were born, and the culture of that particular country could be seen as this the personality of that society, because it's so diverse. And I know that we have to be very conscious of all the different cultures, and it gives us actually a wonderful opportunity to learn from the different cultures. We are very often limited to the cultures that we are born in and exposed to from a very young age on. And I think since 1994, the Gen Zs do not have that kind of historical baggage, as I can, if I can use that term, because you were used to and exposed to a variety of cultures from a much younger age than previous generations have been. Culture, however, still, in simplest terms, still referred to or can be referred to as the personality of a society. It usually represents what has traditionally been aspired to being to follow, but also for many people it means that whatever the acceptable behavior is for people in certain circumstances. For instance, the images that we have on the screen, I think, is very easy to identify the culture that they that they represent based on certain elements, dress specifically, and certain items that's always been part of, is always linked to a certain culture. The way certain people behave and dress, for instance, very much reflect what culture they are representing. But again, it's and I think later on in the chapter, we use the example of the melting pot and the fruit salad as analogies to explain different ways that people look at culture. Culture, beliefs, and values. Values, those things that some societies view as morally acceptable, where other cultures would see it differently and see that behavior as immoral. Beliefs, those mental states or thoughts of express statements that reflects our particular knowledge of a specific subject, where our customs are basically our daily routine behavior as a result of the culture that we have been born into and that we have been used to in our formative years. Values can also be beliefs. However, in order to look at values, they must meet specific criteria, and they must be relatively few. they also serve as a guide for cultural appropriate behavior. They're very enduring and they're difficult to change. People don't just change. I know sometimes when there are multicultural relationships, this becomes a challenge as to whose culture is the one that we want to, if we decide to make it a permanent relationship and later on start with a family, which culture are we actually going to favor, so to speak, or should actually, is it beneficial to maybe offer our children equal opportunities or equal exposure to the different cultures? Because I think that is valuable. It makes us better human beings and better prepared to be more acceptable to things that is not common to us or that we are not used to, and see that as an opportunity to learn and form ourselves and improve our knowledge on a wider variety of options than just limiting ourselves to what we're used to, because we very quickly become creatures of habit and routine and comfort, because we, as human beings, by nature, we don't take kindly to any changes. We don't like change. I see already that people are reluctant for the suggestions of increased restrictions again because of the increases in infections over the last couple of weeks, and that the fact that we are definitely maybe entering a third phase, or a third wave here in the Western Cape very soon, if it hasn't struck us already. And people quite frankly forget very quickly. Last year when we went into hard lockdown, immediately was a great challenge because, right, I mean, I'm so used to a specific routine, and now all of a sudden that has completely changed. And as a matter of fact, it actually had a very positive impact once people realized that, you know what, change is actually not that bad. And they were forced to actually adjust their daily routines, and actually paid more attention to these very important values and beliefs that their cultures represent, because we had more time to look at those things that's important. We sort of forget in the rat race, in our daily rat race of coming to college, doing this, doing part-time work, being a husband, being a brother, being a sister, just being a friend, just living life. We tend to sort of forget those important things that we were taught very early on, certain values that has been taught to us, and that we have sort of neglected because we've become so routinized and used to a specific way of doing things. And I think we can see that already again. People, when the restrictions were lifted, it became easier for people all of a sudden. We become comfortable again. We say, oh, it's almost back to the old normal. It will never be the old normal again. But that's why we are reluctant at the moment to engage in tighter restrictions again, because that requires change again. And it's almost as if we think, I mean, we've been through this. I mean, yeah, we have been through this, but we haven't really learned our lessons. Anyway, it applies to the subject as well, and how we react is very often going to reflect on what is valuable to us and what we believe. If we look at beliefs, I mean, at the end of the day, we talk about vaccinations. Are you going to get vaccinated or not? I think I've asked the question before in class, but do you believe it's aimed? And I think the big problem here is, if I can use that as an example of how people, remember, because your belief is something that you think is correct, that you believe is acceptable and fine. You don't have to necessarily prove it. You believe that you have to study after school because it's going to get you a job, regardless if it's been proven that there is that all people that study get jobs. We know that's not always true, but some people believe it. Some people believe if you do act in a certain way that you're going to get a certain result. Question therefore is, do you believe that it's important to get vaccinated? I think we spoke in class last week and we said, you know what, it might even be a week ago or longer. Maybe if you intend to travel in the near future, and it will become a requirement that you have to prove that you've been vaccinated, like the visitors to the Olympic Games in Tokyo, which I still believe is not going to happen. I just don't think it's appropriate, and I just don't think visiting a mega city like Tokyo, and that many people visiting, it's just asking for trouble. But anyway, those are not decisions we have to take. We have to decide if the opportunity comes, will I get vaccinated or not? And I think that's very much an example of where we will have different opinions. We might be from the same culture. We might even follow the same religion, but it doesn't mean that we believe that all of us, as a result of that, believe that it's necessary or it would be good. It's very much what we as individuals have formed an opinion about. Just underlining again how difficult it is for marketers to try and satisfy all the needs of customers, because even if you are from the same culture and you have the same values, it doesn't mean that you're going to act similarly in every situation. Said it before, we just summarized again with what we have on the screen. Culture or cultural values defines what is considered as suitable behavior in a specific situation. How you dress to a particular function, for instance. If it says black tie, you don't arrive in your flip-flops and billabong t-shirt. If it is, and I know that people have over years have changed, and formal is not necessarily that formal anymore, although there are still very, very formal functions, especially amongst the royalties. But if you look at, for instance, the dress code when you went to church, I know that when I grew up, there were very, very specific actions that was not acceptable. And you have to, women at during the 70s and early 80s had to have the heads covered. They must wear a hat when they go to church. And I just thought when I entered my teenage years, and I thought, and I asked my mother once, why are you wearing a hat to church? She said, well, that's expected of us. It's expected based on what? What's the benefit? Is it going to make you more religious? Is it going to, I don't know, it doesn't serve a functional purpose to me. So I maybe was one that from very early on questioned these things, but to me, it has to be functional. But again, it was much different times because we, I think, very much grew up in greater isolation, and especially in South Africa, where we didn't even allow access. We weren't even allowed access to other cultures, and let alone what happened in the rest of the world. And then we were also internationally isolated as well because of our political situation, and it made it very difficult for, I think, the previous generation to act in a manner that is different to what was suitably acceptable behavior. I just don't never understand. I mean, I'm always I'm more a functional person, really. But anyway, it's just interesting aspects again of our culture. we've done this before, and I think you've also been exposed to it in the form of assessments, in class test or an exam. The three most popular or distinctive forms of learning, where formal, informal, and technical learning represent those three. Formal learning being basically where we are taught by our adults and our brothers and our sisters, people close to us, people in our informal reference group, but people that we are in a daily contact with because we're part of a particular family, a way we sit at a table. How many households have we not had this discussion before? I can still remember clearly when I was growing up, it was always, no, arms off the table. That's not, your arms, your elbows mustn't be on the table. When, you know what? I don't know. It's to me 6 of the one and a half dozen of the other. Any particular customs like that in your households that you grew up that you want to or prepared to share with me or with the group?
Hello, sir.
Hi, morning. How are you?
I'm alright, and you?
I'm good enough. Thank you very much, Zandra. I mean, what kind of strange habits and customs? It could be ones that that you thought was acceptable at that stage, and now later on in life, when you share that with people, they think, "Oh, geez, so that was a strange family," because that's how that sometimes happened.
What's it? I can almost relate on the no elbows on the table.
Oh, yeah.
That was a really big thing.
Have you ever figured out why?
No, but I think it's more to do with the you almost slouch when you put your elbows on the table. You know what I mean? Like your whole body kind of like
It does. It's
like
about
you don't sit up straight. That's
it's
the
about the
thing.
posture. Yes, it's a posture
Yeah.
more than anything else. And nowadays, how do we eat nowadays? Standing,
Oh,
lying, whatever.
yeah. But I think that's probably like the biggest thing I can think of now is also the elbows on the table.
Okay. Yeah, it's strange. Yeah. And there are many things that we look back upon and then we think, okay, right. Or you thought, geez, I hope none of my friends. I actually don't want to invite my friends over for supper because I mean, the customs and the routines that we have is so. You feel that it's strange, it's weird. And then later on, when you speak to people, you say, no, it happens in most households. Here's one question there.
No, so I just wanted to share. When I was younger, I went to one of my friend's houses, and he lived in an Indian household.
Yes.
And obviously, regardless of your religion, it's good to like respect and value other people's religions. And one thing that I wasn't aware of that took me like by surprise was the fact that you had to take your shoes off when you enter the house.
Yes.
And like in our house, like you just like walk in and like you can like chuck your shoes off when like you feel comfortable or whatever. But going into their household, it was that you have to do it. And obviously I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to do this. I was like, okay, this is like pretty interesting. So I just took my shoes off and like do whatever. But I found that like quite interesting. And it was, if I remember correctly, it was only in, I don't know if it was their whole house or if it was only in their bedrooms. I'm not 100% sure.
I had similar experience, Warren. And you know, when you have surname like van Rensburg or you van der Merwe or Venter or Botha, I mean that's you don't get more Afrikaans than that. And I grew up in an Afrikaans household, and so did my sister. And they've been in Singapore for 16, 17 years now, and now relocating to Vietnam. And when they visited us for Christmas last year, and the Christmas meal was at our place. when they got to my front door, they took their shoes off and left it outside on the porch. And I thought, oh my word. And I felt like, okay, you don't really have to do that, but it's become such a habit to them again, because that's the way they used to in Singapore. But yeah, I felt like a real twit at that stage. But again, it's just strange to me that yeah, it definitely is part of the learning. We can, through learning of other cultures, we could change some of the habits that it doesn't mean that we have to completely change to a new culture, but we can be, because we more accepted, we accept the rituals and customs of other cultures more. The more we are exposed to them, some of them might make sense to us, or might just be something that we want to engage in as well. Yes, Warren, there's another question or contribution.
So just another quick one that doesn't necessarily have to do with like religion or culture,
Yeah.
but just like behavior. I also had a friend who it was him and his mom and his stepdad, that they were all deaf.
Yes.
And when I used to go to his house, it was like a thing that they would only wear the hearing aids when they are in public. So
Okay.
when they are in the house, they would take it off and they would speak to each other face to face. So like, again, in our household, it's like I can speak to my mom from the other room, but they're like, if you need something or if you want to like communicate or conversate, then you literally have to like look at them and conversate face to face, so they can like lip read.
I think my dad thought that we were all deaf as well, because that was some of the of his the very few things that he actually was very adamant about. He will not continue with a conversation if the person, I'm talking more in a sort of a family environment as well, and I think because it happens there, it sort of spills over into your working environment too. He wanted eye contact. If I was looking away, I heard the question. I even started answering or replying to the question. If I didn't look him in the eye, he just weren't interested anymore. And it made me more aware of that is actually a more effective way to communicate, and it's a sign of respect to the other person. In their case, it was obviously it was for different reasons, but similar to that, yeah, I've had that experience myself too, and I still do. And it's not necessarily because the person can't hear you because they have a hearing impairment. It's often because it's a sign of respect. They want to engage in a conversation. I'm trying to teach my sons that as well. It's very difficult being Gen Zs because there's always some kind of device present. At watching Survivor Australia last night with my youngest son, and he's the one that says, "Dad, let's make this a standard arrangement. This is the hour that it's actually screened. That's our hour. We chat, we follow the story, we react on certain things that happen, but it allows us the opportunity to have family time, to have one-on-one time." And then 10 minutes into the show, he asked me, okay, right, so who was the guy that was voted out? Or who won that reward challenge? And I said, well, weren't you watching? Because he was on his phone. So I said, well, what's the point of going through this exercise? So I'm also very adamant with that, although I know it's very challenging for Gen Zs because we have determined that they can multitask, that they do multitask, but that they also don't spend too much time on a particular subject at the same time. Languages and symbols and rituals are very are evidence of of a particular culture that is probably most visible more than anything else, and then obviously the different interpretations that a specific symbol can have in different environments. The symbol of the three fingers and a zero that we have on the top of our screen or the middle of our screen represents something. Everything is okay in most Western societies, but it means something different. It means that you are a zero, or that you are not that you are a loser in different countries, or in some countries for that matter. So it's just interesting that, yeah, we have to be careful sometimes in the symbols that we use if we're not familiar with what it means in a particular culture. Language is probably the one thing about a culture that is to me most important, because it is the only way that society can communicate is by or different societies can communicate is by means of a shared language. Without a common language, we cannot share our meanings and our truly communicate with each other. And that's why it is very important. I know that I struggled a lot initially when I went to the UK because of the different dialects. I watched the show the other evening where a Welsh person also said that she's married to an American, and every time she speaks to her mother on the phone, and the conversation is finished, she says, the Welsh language is such a wonderful language, and she says, "What are you talking about? I was talking English." So it sounds different to different people, but yeah, I really struggled in the UK. One of the toughest languages I attempted to learn was French. I gave up very quickly because I realized that, you know what, I get along speaking Afrikaans in France better than I actually I do when I speak my form of French or English for that matter, because of the history between the French and the English. Yes, language is a very, very interesting component of a particular culture. Cultures and the fact that the changing nature of culture means that we as marketers have to be very conscious of specific elements, like why customers do what they do, who the buyers and the users of a particular product or brand is in a particular family. It's very often based on what we did in chapter 1, the different roles that is fulfilled, because in certain cultures, the male would be the person who performs a specific role as consumer, females a different role, and I think that is changing. I think the fact that 50% of marriages end up in divorce means that there are a lot of single parents out there. So very often traditional roles have to change. These are all things that's obviously very important for marketers to understand if they're studying the different behaviors of different of consumers, and try and find a consistent behavioral pattern, which is probably the most difficult challenge of studying consumer behavior. Right. We can, and the two terms that we, I think it was in the term test as well, what's the difference between enculturation and acculturation as still part of learning, of the learning process? It is, enculturation refers to you learning of your own culture. That is usually through formal processes and informal processes where you maybe look up to somebody in your particular culture, like maybe a teacher or a priest. But more specifically, if it's formal, it's your brothers and your sisters, your uncles, your aunts, your parents. And acculturation obviously refers to the learning of foreign or new cultures when we are exposed to them for the first time. Like in my case, when I went overseas for the first time, when I traveled to interrupt my working in Europe, I tend to sort of take an extended break of a week to maybe 2 weeks every 4 months that I work. I wanted to travel to as many destinations in Europe to expose myself to different cultures. At one point, I think when I was in Turkey, I actually decided to stay there for 3-4 weeks and actually took on a part-time job there just to get to know the culture better. And I know when I returned, and my dad went through my my images of me visiting Europe, because I haven't been home for 2 years. And it was before the time of cell phones, and where we can actually store all our images and or even send our images immediately back to them. He was quite he was looking for me at certain landmarks, like the Eiffel Tower or the Big Ben in London. And I said, well, you know what? I worked there. I was part of them temporarily. I was part of that particular culture. And these are just landmarks and beacons that obviously tourists do. And I wasn't doing the tourist approach to this. I wanted to learn from the different cultures. And up to today, I very much enjoy, especially the Spanish and the Turkish cultures, because I've spent more time there, and I actually had more time to get to know how they operate and what's important to them. But it's interesting, the opportunity, if we are provided, and we don't have to travel globally to have that experience. We can have that experience in our own country, because we've got so many different cultures represented here. And we're not talking just, we're talking about just ethnic cultures, local cultures. We're not even talking about the foreign citizens from different countries across the globe who live in our country. I had the very fortunate experience to share time, work as a colleague with a Muslim, with somebody who believed in the Muslim religion, and it gave me. We worked together for 5 years, and we're actually still friends. And I really got to know the culture well. I went to many of their celebrations, weddings, and funerals, and it was just a very interesting learning curve, and very important learning curve, I think. I think we have come to realize that it is important for us. We do not live in isolation in a particular country, and we have to, if we want to be better individuals and better citizens of our country, we need to open up more to different cultures and expose ourselves to opportunities to learn from different cultures. I can start with the rest of this chapter, or the rest of the chapter, as a matter of fact, is not that important. I went through it last night, and I think that there's nothing really that stood out for me in the remainder of the chapter that's extremely important. The one thing I might want to just point out again is, if we look at the different, my opinion, excuse me, my apologies for that, is the living standards measurement, the different categories that is available to as another measure, just to look at the core South African values. Having gone through the remaining couple of pages in chapter 4, I think a lot of that is addressed in greater detail in later chapters in this module. So I'm not going to cover them now. So in hindsight, doing the revision, I think it's of greater value if this is addressed in a later session, for instance. It makes more sense then. Otherwise, it just appears as a part of chapter 4, but you don't really sure where it fits in. Any questions, anybody at this point? Because it would mean the end of today's session if you do not have any questions. Anybody? Any examples you still want to share?
So,
Yes.
on the thing about like I want to say like hand signals and stuff.
Yeah.
I found it pretty interesting is when you ask like I want to say younger kids,
Yes.
like how to sign that you're on the phone.
Yeah.
They basically make like an open palm thing where we almost make the surface sign of the thumb and the pinky sticking out because that's how we had
Very true. Very
those
true.
kinds of phones where they only know like touch screens.
Yeah, and as I said, if all the different signs and signals are not represented on the devices that they use, then obviously they are limited with their choices. So yeah, there's a constant update regarding that to ensure that all the possible signs is used. But then sometimes I think the inappropriate use of the different ones is sometimes very funny and entertaining to me. But yeah, we sometimes make the mistake not realizing or sending an emoji for somebody. And okay, I'm not 100% sure what this emoji. As you study different signs, and you also have to study all the different emojis and what they represent before you embarrass yourself with sending the wrong one to the wrong person. But yes, it can happen. That's it, because it's a form of communication. It's a modern form of communication, and therefore we need to know all the equip ourselves with all the tools to be able to communicate effectively. Because sometimes the message can go to the wrong person, or the wrong message, or the message in which it was constructed ends up being interpreted incorrectly by the other person because of the different symbols that you have used or incorrect symbols that you have used. It has led to many very embarrassing situations, but also I think more funny, more humorous situations. Anybody, any questions at this point? Are you all good? It's almost lunchtime. Are you guys looking forward coming back on campus?
I've gotten so used to doing it on Teams and just lying in my bed, half asleep. Okay, let me just open my phone, just attend class, even though, I'm still half dead to the world.
Yeah, I know, and I think yes. I said to somebody yesterday as well. I think this week, working from my home study was I quite enjoyed it, but I do find that I work longer hours. I go to bed much later. It's almost as if that I'm using that time that I'm usually stuck in traffic more effectively and differently. But yeah, a good blend is fine. But yeah, I think lots of us have become used to the home game much more after this week of being off campus. People, thank you very much for today's session. I will upload the recording as soon as I'm finished with this session. I trust that you will have a good weekend, that you'll stay safe. We will chat again and we will cover chapter 5, and I think might even sections of chapter 6 as part of our continuous revision when we meet for the first period again next Tuesday. if nobody else has anything to add, Saskia, good luck with Chelsea on the weekend. We look forward to having a very positive conversation on Tuesday regarding the result of that game. The rest of you, stay safe, enjoy your weekend, and we will see each other after the weekend.
Thank you